Well, good evening and welcome to the Facebook Live of the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am joined by Paul, and we're trying something new there with a little bit of promotions in front to just kind of get that out of the way and make things a little bit easier for us on the back side of it. So it's killing me. So anyhow, I'm sorry.
I'm here too.
Trying to regain my composure. Mike's Scully's with us tonight, and we're going to have Jim Howard joining us here shortly as soon as I bring him in. So we're going to talk about training tonight. So if you're joining us for the first time, hey Dave, how's it going? Yeah, everybody looks at their monitors. Dave Johnson just joined us. He's usually pretty faithful with watching us. I'm not sure exactly why some days, but we seem to have gotten most of the kinks worked out of our streaming. So hopefully it's a little bit clearer and better tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about training, and we're going to mix that up a little bit with also opening back up and some things in regards to training with opening back up, mostly because I know I spoke to a lot of churches, or several churches today, that are opening the beginning of May. So they're looking at another week or so, and then they're going to be back to the regular operation stage, or at least abbreviated version of being open. I know a lot of churches are kind of sectioning off different seating arrangements and trying to come up with different strategies and that sort of thing to promote some social distancing until we flatten the curve where they are. Between you and me and the lamppost, I'm getting kind of tired and antsy of the flatten the curve. Yeah, I'm ready to get back to church, and I know they say the church is people and not the building, but it sure is nice to have the routine of, on Sunday going and worshiping and yeah. And there's a bunch of people, I realized the other day, there's a bunch of people that I haven't seen in 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, I really miss walking up to that person and shaking their hand or doing a fist bump or that sort of thing. So let me bring Jim in here. Hey, Jim, how are you, sir?
Doing well. How's it going?
Good.
Hey, Jim.
Real good.
Caught me writing stuff down.
Sorry.
That's all right. And here he is. Oh yeah.
So,
hey.
Yeah.
Glad I was sitting down. No.
It's all good.
Double duty for you tonight, huh, Jim?
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
If anybody saw it, just talking about how we got started. So we did a webinar last week, and it went really well, but we had people asking where we came from. And so that was kind of what we were doing tonight, to talk about it, how we got to where we are today. God's plan. So I was just kind of recapping that now for people that have been kind of starting to follow us. We're starting to pick up a lot of people. So it's been very exciting. Very exciting.
That's good. That's real good. Yeah, I usually try and listen to it if I'm not running around the house after my kids or that sort of thing, or getting done with church. But I did like how you kind of explained some of your history too, and getting into law enforcement. So I actually shared it in our group. So if you're listening to this and you haven't had a chance to see or sign up for some of Jim's content, you can definitely watch. And when we do our watch parties during the week, I'll try and push that in there or set it up so it plays in there too. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and you guys have been tearing it up with Zoom and trying to get webinars set up for people, which is great too, because that's a lot of free resources that don't cost really anything to anyone. So,
Well, we went ahead and purchased the package so we could stay on as long as we wanted to. If you do with the free, it cuts you off at 40 minutes. And I mean, there's no, I mean, we did our first men's group. We do a Monday night men's group, and we did it with Zoom, and we had just a free package. And I got ready to say the prayer, and it was gone. I was
we were using it. We use it at our church as well too, and they ended up purchasing it because we were using it for our life group, and that the same thing happened. They are merciless about giving you prayer time. It's like, hey,
the great thing is, I've heard Zoom is poised to buy Amazon now. They've made so much money, so that's always good.
Sure.
There's still some kinks in it because we were trying to use it tonight because you can do your Facebook Live through Zoom.
Right.
But it locked up on us. And so we quickly just said, okay, drop Zoom, go Facebook Live, because it went perfect for us the other night. It kind of scares me. And if you have a closed group, it will not work with the closed group. So we had to go back to the Trinity Security Allies Facebook page just to get it to work.
Okay.
So it's just learning those. Yeah, it's just, there's just a little things here and there, that just drive you insane. So it doesn't play video well. I had video in a PowerPoint, and it was terrible. So we had recorded it. My daughter knows how to splice, so we took the video and put it in, we put it out there YouTube over radios. We were talking about radios, and we found 2 inexpensive radios, and they were impressive. Technology today is unreal. One is $20 for two. They're 2 watts, and they're programmable, so we can hook our Motorola's in with them. And we have 28 acres of property on our church. So I went from one end to the other, and then, of course, went inside the buildings. Now, we did run into some problems with them in the building, but we have we have probably close to, around 17,000 to 20,000 square feet from one end to the other. So, if you're at one end to the other, you did run into some issues. But, man, I was impressed. And for small churches, this is like perfect. It really was. Take it out of the box, and you can go. So
are there any FCC problems with a 2-watt radio?
No, in fact, before I even went online, I went out and of course it made my head hurt trying to read through, but it is called a regional family or something like that, or somebody will know it. The ham operators out here will know it, but it's a RF something. And those you can use, those anybody can use anywhere. And so it's when they get above. I'm sorry?
FMRS.
Hang on, I'll tell you. The 2 watts were fine. Everything I read on it. And plus Google, in fact, let me go to Amazon because they're the ones that sell it.
Oh, Dave Johnson is the radio guy. He said GMRS. So.
Yeah. Well,
now GRMS, from what I read, GRMS requires a license. There's another one that doesn't, and I'll pull it up real quick here and get that for you because it listed it on the Amazon radio. Of course, there they are. They're Bofang, if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
And they're called FRS radios, family something radios, and those do not require a license because that was one of the things that concerned us. We didn't want to get anybody in any trouble. We also worked with a company who brought out their radio, and I'm sitting here going blank on them. Kyle was the kid's name, and it's Klein Electronics, which I found out that Carl Chin and his group recommend them also. And they have a little thing called the Black Box Pocket, which was it was almost twice as much for one radio, but the sucker was very sturdy. And plus Kyle's here in Tampa, I'm hoping you could probably get the same deal that you're up there. They will program them for you if you already have some radios and they want to, you want to just add to your set. So like I said, we took them out and we played. What really impressed me about both of them, you think about it, 2 radios for $21. That's how much they are, $21.99. I expected to pick it up and crush it in my hand, when I pulled it out of the box. And these suckers were heavy. I mean, they felt hefty. I mean, they were very impressive. I think you could drop it a couple of times, and not break it. I have guys that can break anything though, so don't worry. Yeah, they've broken the antennas off of Motorola's, which just drive me insane.
Wow.
But the only thing about both of them, the earpieces on both of them were crap. I mean, I couldn't use them. You have to go out and buy an aftermarket one on that. So that's where your cost is going to, you have to pay a little bit more. But the Baofangs, you can get some of their inside the ear canal headsets for like $10 for $15. They're disposable. They work well. We use them. Retivus is one that we use, and I have my own setup to where I have not inside my canal, but like inside the ear, but I can still hear with it. Where the inside the canal, I didn't like the way it kind of cut off my sound. So, yeah. But like I said, we recommend just going out and looking at it because we played with them and went from, like I said, from point A to point B. It was a lot of fun. But
we started actually with Baofeng radios, and what we were finding, because of our building, and our campus is pretty large as well, but because of our building and all the concrete that we had in it, that without a repeater it just wasn't possible. And then with the repeater, we tried putting a repeater in, and it was just really frustrating. And so we started working with a company in California that, I mean, if you Google radios, it pops up like in everything, because they do a lot with churches and schools. But we decided to go with a 5-watt RCA, and just kind of upgrade, because we were tired of messing around with them. But several of the smaller ministries still use the Baofeng because they're, out in the parking lot, it's a shorter distance. So, and the other thing too is because they're pretty cost efficient. If somebody drives over one with their car doing traffic, I'm not going to.
Which will happen.
Right. Well, absolutely.
Drop it in the toilet.
Guys, turn them back in, and it's like duct tape together, right? But yeah, I'm like, well, if it's if it's a $20 radio, then at least I won't have to worry about it too much, because we can get another one. So,
well, and we've been very. I mean, most of our churches are smaller churches. We try, when you get into the larger churches, they've already got a safety team. They've got either a safety team or police, because they can afford it.
Sure.
Most of the churches we deal with are 500 or less. And so these little radios like this are just lifesavers, because, the first thing that they do is they go out and they have some guy that walks in the door and says, "Hey, I can sell you a radio for $100 a piece." Well, how many you need? Well, 10 or 12, or, they can't afford it. That's the last thing they want to hear. Yeah. So with something like this, like I said, I was very impressed. Look, from one end of our church inside the building to the other end, didn't work. I mean, you couldn't. Now, as you started to move toward each other, you start picking each other up real clear. But one was behind the stage, where, of course, there's all the lighting and computers and everything that you could think of, wiring, all that stuff like that. And I was at the other end, which, of course, like you're talking about, James, the concrete. So, they failed. I mean, they truly did. But my Motorola's fail.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Our Motorola's fail terribly at times. And
honestly, we've gotten to the point of saying, we have about 100. I think our campus is about 150,000 square feet from end to end. But and we've just added on. So, you add on from the 50s and the 70s and et cetera. So different materials in the building. But yeah, we have shielding up in the ceiling
Right.
on the back of the tiles, right? And it's like an aluminum, I guess supposed to be fire resistant or help them be fire resistant or something like that.
Yep.
And what we were finding is that was impacting it. So anymore, I mean, honestly, I just tell people, I'm like, look, if you're trying to get a hold of me and it's a long conversation, just call me on my cell phone.
We do a lot of texting. I mean,
Yeah.
because we have our children's ministry and several other ministries that listen to the radio, because if something happens, we want to put things into play. So a lot of times inside the worship center, while we can, I mean, there's no emergency going on, we'll text each other all the time. And then that way it just keeps the chatter down. But listen, police radios aren't the greatest either.
No.
I mean, I've worked with agencies that you were better off with tin cans and string than actually having a radio there. And so, the small town of Bel Air that I worked in, it was really funny. It was just this is the way Motorola, and nothing against, if y'all work for Motorola, don't take this personal. But we had, I know. We had like an old Motorola system that we used in the town. And and we're talking 2 square miles. That's how big this town was. And if you got to one end of the town to the other, you couldn't hear each other. And so Motorola wanted to come out and sell us this repeater. And I've worked with radios. And I said, you know what? How about if I extend the antenna that's on the back of my car? And they were like, oh, that won't work. And I said, well, let me give it a try. So Pinellas County had gotten rid of all their small radio. I mean, I think those are 800 or something. I don't remember exactly what, but they had gotten rid of theirs, and they had like 2 feet, I think it was. No, maybe 1.5 foot antennas. And man, we threw those on the car, and I live an hour away from the police department, and I could still hear people an hour away. So, I mean, just extending the radio up, just makes it, people just, they get sucked into, oh yeah, let's buy new radios. No.
We had the same thing. Well, I guess it was probably more late 90s, early 2000s, but when I worked for the fire department, they would issue us 5-watt Motorola radios, and we had to call our dispatch, which was about 20 miles away, and our town was in the middle of a mountain range. So you've got mountains everywhere. So
yeah.
At one point in time, it was like, you're better off before you leave your house, picking up the phone and calling dispatch and saying, hey, I'm on the way to go get an ambulance or fire truck. And, and maybe if you were in the right place, if the vehicle was in the right place when you pulled out of the fire station, you could get, direct service to dispatch to let them know that, you had people. But you were going to say something, Paul?
Yeah, and I had another comment because you'd mentioned police radios. Being a chaplain with law enforcement for 8 years, I have seen officers walk over and they can't get out on their portable and grab the radio out of their vehicle, and they can't get out. I actually watched a guy because dispatch is like, status, are you okay? Do we send in backup? Right. We're calling the Marines. And, you're getting ready to have like helicopters with searchlights, and they can't get out. And finally, I watched a guy climb up on top of his cruiser, and he's holding the radio up, and they're like, well, you're coming through broken, but okay. And he's like, but going back to the Baofangs, I learned some very powerful lessons about the Baofangs early on. And you can get yourself in trouble on certain frequencies, and I don't pretend to remember what they were, but we landed on one that we could work with. And you'll get a kick out of this, Jim. And I don't know if you've heard this yet, Mike. I know James has. But I had people, there's 2 buttons on this thing. One turns it on and it turns the volume up. It's not complicated. The other one you don't touch because I have you on the frequency I want. And so I couldn't get people to leave them alone. And I would give them a quick primer on how to use them. Volume, no touchy. And I would come back and they'd be on channel 8. And so I was really thinking about this, talked to a friend of mine, and he goes, well, you know that you can reprogram those, Mr. IT guy. So I looked it up, figured it out, and I forget what the software was I used, but it was not what came with it. It's USB and it adapts over and plugs in. Yep. And what I did was I changed all the frequencies on every channel to the same frequency. Oh, it was so aggravating because I would have an emergency and I would be like, please send this person out. And nobody was getting it because people couldn't leave the buttons alone.
Right.
And I was to the point of like getting ready to melt the button to the phone. I was so aggravated. And so the Baofangs are incredibly scalable. And so that was one of my lessons about the Baofangs. And then I may know somebody that may have turned those up to the maximum wattage that was above what was recommended. And it does help the performance.
It does. It does. You know, the Baofangs had a side press to talk.
Yep.
And the black box had a front press to talk. Well, our Motorola's, one of our Motorola's has a front press to talk. And so one of our guys stuck it in his back pocket one day and leaned over talking to a girl, trying to get her to go out with him.
Oh, no.
He's all over. And we're trying to find him. And he's going, yeah, I like Panera's. You want to go to Panera's? Yeah, I love to go to Panera's. We could go meet there some. Really? You know? And he thought it was a huge joke until I got a hold of him. And I lose my temper sometimes over things like that because, first off, it was inappropriate. And second, you're tying up a radio that, we can't broadcast now in case of emergency.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that's a great point. If you get the high dollar radios, you have admin radios that can actually broadcast back over. And I've seen that in law enforcement situations or in search and rescue situations where somebody's keying and they don't know it. And the boss comes over and is like, quit keying the mic. And everybody starts scrambling. Yeah. And I did a video about this a long time ago. I'm going to hold my phone like it's a walkie with a push to talk button. But I did a video a long time ago about this and it really resonated with a campus in Florida, a huge mega church. This guy got a hold of me. He's like, hey, thank you for this. I showed him how to, in this video, how to take a piece of tape and a pen or a whatever, and you put it against it and you wrap it around there and you key it and it's continued to press. And then I put a radio against it and taped it together. You've completely jammed that radio.
Sure.
Unless you have a plan that you switch to another frequency, and I know that's kind of James Bond, but you've literally disabled that entire radio network. Mm-hmm. And if you were blasting, punk rock music on it, nobody's going to hear anything. And right. It's that simple to jam certain radios. So they have their ups and downs. I prefer radio though to text in for rapidity. But if you just want something discreet, text is better.
Like I said, our text messages are basically discreet.
Yes. And
you have to watch auto correct on the spelling because that'll get you in trouble too. I won't even go in there now. We can talk about that another night.
Yep.
No, I was just going to say that we have a gentleman, and if he's watching tonight, I love him. I love him like a brother. But we have a gentleman that does the song directing for one of the Sunday school classes. And so he'll come in and pick up a radio and then, go direct the singing. And, it never fails. We'll all be like, hey, you're keying your radio, because I don't know how he does it. But when he goes up on the stage and directs music, he ends up keying his mic. And so, we're all brought into the service at that point.
They have a way of finding. I mean, they can find ways of doing it. You say no, they can't. Yeah, they can. Yeah.
I baptized a Baofang. It didn't do well. I think it had a demon or something because it was baptized by immersion and it didn't. No, it wasn't good. So
fun time. So now that we've completely derailed this evening's topic, hey, we're talking about radios, so that's important. Communication is important. Well, honestly, I think originally we were going to try and follow up. The last time we had John, we were talking about just basic training, and we were going to try and follow up with that. And thought kind of popped into my head because, like I mentioned before, so I've heard from quite a few churches that the beginning of May they're going to open back up and that sort of thing. So really only having a week or two at most for some of these churches. Maybe we can talk about some of the things that churches should do to get ready for that. I know, like for me, kind of watching it, I had actually pushed our schedule out till I think the middle of May. So before we open up, I've got to go back in and try and reschedule my teams and get that dusted off and ready to go too. But having a week or two to open is also concerning.
Well, I kind of want to jump in real quick on something that just came about. We had a church here in Tampa that was, when the lockdown was going on, they pushed it, and the state attorney kind of told them not to, and they weren't practicing the social distancing or the safe stuff. And so the pastor ended up getting a ticket. He was they arrested. He went in and was ready and walked right back out. He just got processed. But he came on TV and on kind of a webcam like this and said, "Well, I'm going to close down the church because I don't want my congregation to be harassed by the tyrants of this government and stuff like that." Well, what we found out was his insurance company shut him down. This is something you need to check before you go live, because if you go live and somebody comes into your church and says they caught the virus from somebody inside your church, what type of liability issue are you going to be facing? And I found that very interesting. So
yeah, it is.
I would recommend everybody to make sure one of the things they do, because the faith-based security network, that Carl Chin group, I belong to it, and I just read one of where a church went back to service today. It was their first day back. They're in Montana, which to me, I thought Montana would be, they're all together, but they did a lot of work. You can tell they did a lot of planning in there. They put, I'm concerned. I don't know how we're going to do this. I really don't, because I talked about face masks, wearing a mask last week, and I know you kind of jumped in on it, but I have to say, if your church says, "Listen, James, we're going live next week, but we're going to require face masks and we're going to require, social distancing and things like that." First off, okay, everybody's going to have a face mask on. So we need to be training everybody to be looking for posturing and eyes darting around and nervousness and all these things like this. And plus, listen, I recognize people by their walk. I run real early in the morning and I run on a trail. And I saw this guy he's out there every morning walking, and he had this just unusual walk. And I'd say hello to him, but it's so dark, I can't see his face. I could just see that walk in front of me. And I was standing at the front door one day and saw that walk coming toward me. And I stopped him when he came in. I said, "You walk the trail all the time?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, I'm the runner that goes by you all the time." And we started talking. I mean, we now talk to each other all the time. But what I'm saying is, most of the people we will know. Who we don't know, we have to go up and start talking to them. And we have to a lot of your safety team guys don't like to talk to people. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'm just there in case a guy comes in with a gun. No, we need intelligence information, gentlemen. If you've never worked intelligence before, you got to start learning how to do it. And a friendly conversation, both of you behind the mask, kind of gives you a little bit of a, he doesn't know you either, or maybe he does. He goes, "Hey, it's me," but then he gets kicked. But I mean, it's just the things that we need to be thinking about that could possibly happen. I can tell you right now, if your church said no mask, none whatsoever, and the 80-year-old woman that you love dearly comes walking in with one, are you going to look at her and say, "Out the door"?
2319.
Yeah. 2319. Right. What are you going to do? So if you will let the 80-year-old, how about the 30-year-old that's concerned about their health? So, and who's going to be the social distancing police?
Right. Nobody
you're going to walk
wants to
around.
do that.
I'm reading this one from the faith-based, and I love it because they use the swimming pool noodles to decide what was 6 feet. So you're running around with these noodles, putting them between people,
Leave room for Jesus. Leave room for Jesus.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I'm at a high school dance now, and three, let's separate here 6 feet.
Sure.
Now, come on now, you're getting too close. How are you going to do that?
There's two, in my mind, two things pop up from that. So first of all, you're absolutely right, because not every person is going to have a mask that decided to stay at home. So then you have to address, okay, do we give the person a mask when they come in?
Sure. Do you have enough?
Or do we have enough? Because all of a sudden now, like, for example, our church, if we had an average of 800 people,
yep,
you have to have plus masks. And then the second piece of that is, all of the churches that I've talked to since this began have still been working in the community, have been networking, have been trying to help people, have been building a response and an interest in church. So now we have this influx, and that's great. I'm grateful, but the reality is, I think when we do open the doors, and I know, Jim, you've said this before, we're going to see a lot of people that we don't know because they're interested in, the faith of the church, the faith of the pastor. Okay, I'm going to start this church thing because you guys reached out to me and gave me some groceries, and I'm curious what you all are about. So I think that honestly, and I've talked about that several times with different people, but I think honestly, watching someone's mannerisms has never been more important. Amen. Because I
love you for what you just said right there. I have been fighting this for years. Mm-hmm. Situational awareness and threat profiling. This is what we should be teaching. Verbal de-escalation after that. Then get into your active shooter stuff, because seriously, folks, if we can stop it before it happens, if we see it and we stop it before it happens, we're way ahead of the game. When you let it happen, I'm sorry. I hope I don't want anybody to ever take this the wrong way, but the white settlement shooting should have never happened. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. The guy walks in with a fake wig and a fake beard. He should have never been allowed inside the church. I'm sorry. And I'll take a lot of heat from that, but I'm just, he got in, not only get in, he had a jacket on. Now, it was cold that day. It was 55 degrees. So in Texas, that's kind of cold. And he had his left hand inside his jacket holding on to something. Why wasn't police called? Why did he went to the bathroom at one time. They could have easily shut him down right then and there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Folks, we have got to get into this. Profiling is not a nasty word. I don't know if you got kids. I have two girls. What was that, Mike? What?
I have two kids.
You have two kids, boy or girls?
But one of each.
Okay. So when a little boy shows up on your front yard talking to your little girl, what do you do? Yeah. But you profile him. How old is your daughter?
Oh, she's only 6.
Okay.
It's still coming.
I got time.
You're looking at the 7-year-old and you're going, what do your parents do? What's your future? Do you have a 401k?
Exactly.
You're asking these questions.
Fill out this application.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I tell people this. My daughters, gosh, used to just, Dad, we're going to go over to somebody's house. No, you're not. I need to know who they are. And listen, I'm not using police stuff, but I can do a lot of work on this internet. I can tell you that right now. I can find a lot of people. But I always tell them that when they bring a little boy home, I offer them a drink. I give them a drink with glass and a straw. Okay. Now think about this all the way through. And so when they get finished drinking, I put on a glove and I pick it up and I say, I've got your fingerprints and I got your DNA. If I find either one of these on my daughter, I don't mind going back to prison. Okay. Don't even think about it. So I forgot where we were. Sorry about that. But
There's 500 fathers at home going, oh, that's good. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Well,
we have to get into the threat profiling. We have to get into watching people. Look, that's what the watchmen on the walls did. That's exactly what they did. They were intelligence information. And we need to be, if one of my guys comes to me and says, hey, have you seen this guy over here? And I go talk to him and then come back and give me a report.
Mm-hmm.
What? Go talk to him. We have a meet and greet. Of course, now we don't have a meet and greet. We got to wave, but go talk to him. Find out who he is. Because they come to me and they say, hey, we have a guy that wears a red Corvette jacket all the time. And he's very animated in his worship. The first time he came, he was there all 3 services. I mean, he was very animated. I went over and started talking to him. And it was real easy. I walked up to him. I said, do you have a Corvette or do you just like that jacket? I mean, that, seriously, I mean, this is how easy it is to talk to somebody, I've never seen you before. Is this your first time here? Let's make you welcome, and if you do it the right way and not confrontational, you're going to,
I do the same thing. I'll walk up to somebody and I'll stick my, before the social distancing, I'd stick my hand out and I'd say, hi, I've never met you. I'm James, I saw you in the service. What's your story?
Right.
But I think, honestly, I think that coming back, I think that people, or at least I would hope that people are more aware and in tune to that.
Yes.
I mean, you do the same thing I do, Jim. I mean, how many churches do you talk to? And it's like, we've gone through the pandemic thing. We're coming out of it to finish up this year. And it's like, okay, so white settlement is gone. Nobody's, we're not talking about it anymore. It's out of all of our imaginations. It's out of all of our minds. And here, again, we've got a situation where we're ready to reopen to the public. We've been working in the community enough to make people question why we do what we do, which is good, right? So we've got all these people coming in. And on top of that, we have, DHS sending out letters saying, hey, guys, just as a heads up, we're not reporting anything, but we're telling you that people are which if you look at the news and media, and I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but there are already people out there that are complaining about churches because of the churches that met. Now they're saying, wait a second, you guys are the ones that are making this spread and have issues with it.
I will give you a perfect example of that happened to me last night. I got a call from one of the staff that said, we have a Jeep rally going on our church. And he said they're doing donuts and tearing up the grass and all stuff like this. Well, I live 2 minutes away from the church. So I said, I'm on my way, And so, I loaded up my gear, headed that way. Well, I get there, and as I'm pulling up on it, these Jeeps are all lined up. There was about 20 to 25 of them. They're all lined up, neatly lined up. And so I go to get out of the car, and I happen to recognize a friend of mine, played softball with him, used to go to the church, doesn't anymore. But I saw him, and I walked over to him. I said, hey, Ken, what's going on here? And there was a 16-year-old birthday party, but only family could come because we're doing our social distancing, And so they're a part of a Jeep club and they all know this kid. So they drove around the house and was honking and waving at him, celebrating. And so this was the rally point to get it going. And so they all met back up there after it was over with. And, they were just talking. There was fresh air, social distancing. Okay. There was a lady that took pictures and called the police and complained on the church, saying the church had done this, that the church has set this up. What is the church thinking? Are they trying to kill all of us out here, So, look, I was in a Walmart the other day. A guy sneezed, and I ran 3 blocks before I finally stopped. I mean, it's just the mindset that we've gotten now, instead of saying, God bless you, I'm moving, and it's the mindset. And so, yes, you're going to have complaints. People are going to listen. You put cars in your parking lot, people are going to complain. I said this. I said this. I think it was last week. Contact your local law enforcement and find out what their temperature is on this, because you don't want them showing up and going, you're not social distancing, and start talking to other people in the press and all this stuff and just making it go bad. Find out how they're going to read this. You know, we have deputies on our property to direct traffic. They're also a deterrent. We appreciate that. We've still got the crazies that come in. They don't care if the sheriffs are there or not. They're coming in the door. And I shouldn't say it like that. I mean, you know, these people do need help. You need to love them. I'm sorry. I take that back. You know, that was politically incorrect, and I apologize. You know, but we have
He's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of who I was talking about. Anyway, we have to make sure that we are aware of the temperature in the neighborhood. They complain on us all the time. They don't like our music, so they complain on us all the time. You know, our pastor wanted to do kind of a drive-in, you know, type service, but knew exactly what was going to happen. The neighbors would be calling and complaining. And plus, how do you stop people from getting out of their car and going over and talking to somebody? And don't pull your safety team in on that. That's just terrible. That does nothing but cause you trouble. You know, you can't. We cannot. We want to try to do as much as we possibly can without hampering what is about to happen. There's going to be an explosion of people coming to churches. I'm promising you that. Yeah. We're going to see something that we may never see again right now. We saw it kind of 9/11, but not like this. 9/11 affected a lot of people. I was in DC when 9/11 happened. It affected me. I had a friend I worked with. Her husband worked in the Pentagon. My buddy is the Arlington police chief. He was there, all these different things like this. I had a lot of people around that I knew that was involved in that. It affected us. But you know what? In Florida, it didn't affect them as much as it did up there. This has affected everybody across the United States. They've lost jobs. They've lost family members. They've seen people sick. It is a scare. They're scared to go outside. We've done this. And so when you say, hey, I'm going to open up a church and there might be an answer you can find in here, amen, they're going to be knocking on the doors. They're going to be coming in. What are you going to do with your greeters? You know, get them out of the way. Just open the door up. Hey, you got to come in 6 feet at a time. I mean, that's why our church has decided that they're not going to really open up until maybe phase 2, just to make it a little bit easier. But I was on a webinar the other week. Willow Creek was one of them, and a couple of other larger churches that I recognize, and they said they're not opening up until, you know, the restrictions are a lot less. They'll still be practicing no hugging, maybe, but you know,
well, it's just hard. I mean,
it is.
Our phase 2 in Ohio is, I think, 50 or less. And, you know, you think about that and it's like, even a small church, that's going to be a challenge for, unless they have something. What were you going to say, Mike, about the drive-ins?
So we saw a headline that there was actually a church, I want to say it was Kentucky, I could be wrong, but literally they had somebody that escalated to the point they didn't bother to call the cops. They just went out and dumped a whole bag full of nails across the driveway. Yeah. And so literally took it into their own hands. And I think there's a level of psychosis here from what we've all gone through. We've just had a very big grief crisis. And I think there's people that are now going to escalate to things that they wouldn't have normally done because they're in a state they're not currently in. I mean, heck, look at all of us. If we exit this in the same way we entered all of this, we're doing something wrong. So we need to be prepared for that and be able to not only look out for that escalation inside the building, but maybe it's in the driveway. Maybe it's in the parking lot.
Well, and listen, great point, because we stress rovers. They're your first line of defense. We stress it. I mean, we've got a golf cart and you know, here's how you teach guys to do this. Okay. There were a couple of churches, this is about it hasn't happened recently. I have not seen it recently, but it seemed like there were two churches that had big families that had showed up at church, grab all their kids and all the stuff that they got to take with them, and accidentally left the kid in the car. And we had 2 deaths. So I would tell my guys that when they're riding around out there looking at these cars, if you see a child seat, make sure it's empty. And that slows them down. And plus it gives them something to look for, So now we've got, just like you said, Mike, we got to take it a step past that. We got to start looking for those that there's going to be stressors out here. This is the thing that everybody talks about. This is what DHS was talking about, was the stressors. There's going to be stressors. I lost my job. I'm mad at God. I went for 20 some odd years. I was mad at God. Now I never took it out on the church. I was just mad at God. But there's going to be these stressors out here that we have to really be paying attention. And that guy may pull up and be ready to walk in and shoot up the church. And the guy that confronts him and talks to him and gives him that calming, talk may stop that completely, So it's really important that we get our teams ready. Yeah. When we thought we were going to go back, I was hoping and praying that we were going to be ready to go Easter. I really was. I had high hopes of being ready to go Easter. And I set up training the week before Easter to get my guys back in gear, mental gear, to be able to start thinking about what we need to be looking for when people show up at the doors. And of course, we didn't have it on Easter. And here's the other thing too. The medical team that I have said they weren't coming. They weren't going to come to the training because it was too hot and heavy during that time frame. So, if your medical team shows up, they're going to be yelling at you if you don't have a mask on.
It's hard. Definitely, for sure. And I think that honestly, we'll have a more heightened awareness, but, going back through that and kind of, I think for us, I see it as, I'm going to need to take some time, or the leadership is going to need to take some time and actually go back through roles and job functions and just remind people and say, hey, look, this is what we're doing. Just remember, this is our function for each role, because we've been out of practice. We haven't been doing that. So for those of you that I think are listening that might be, or later on, that might be listening, if you're a leader, I think it would make a lot of sense to revisit with your team and maybe do a team meeting and say, hey, look, let's treat this like an alert situation, because we need to be watching people from, the parking lot straight on in.
Yeah. I made a comment that you really need a strong safety team leader. But the other thing that you need in this is you need your church to understand that they need to bring everybody in when they're getting ready to open this up. They need your ushers. They need your greeters. They need all the volunteers, all the staff to be brought in, because this is something that we've never faced before. And it is going to be, I'm really happy that this guy that I was reading here from the FBSN said that theirs went well. That's people that understand. And I'll get in trouble for this, but he's in Montana. How many people show up? No, I'm kidding. When we look at, I'm just saying, James, you said, 800 people in a church service. We average 2,000 people a Sunday. Now we have 3 services. Okay. So, the early one is, maybe 600 people. Then we have 800 people. And then, then at nighttime, we fill it out. But
that's another thing with it too. Actually, now that you mention it, it just kind of popped into my head. We've talked for a long time about adding services. Mm-hmm. This is the type of event that could just push us to do that, where, because we have so many people that are interested in coming in from the community. I don't know. I mean, for a long period of time, we've got next month, I think in May, we've got some great folks coming in. I know Carl Chin has actually said he was going to come on here and chat with us. And then John Riley, I believe is his name, from Gentle Response. He works a lot with Simon Osimo about de-escalation and stuff like that. So we're going to have him on, hopefully, to talk about de-escalation and kind of emphasize that, and some tips and stuff that we can kind of up train, I guess, people and get them ready and that sort of thing. But we're kind of running out of time, but is there anything off the top of anybody else's heads as far as, having a meeting would be great, would be important, revisit everything. Is there, I don't know, Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did, and it kind of circles back around to the beginning, Jim, when you started talking, is I've been thinking about the white settlement shooting, and everybody says, and I agree, I'm not disagreeing. Everybody says he should have never been allowed in the sanctuary in a disguise. And so all of these churches have gone, we would never let anybody into our church in a disguise. And now 70% of the people possibly coming into our churches may be in a disguise. And I think God has as much a sense of humor as a sense of purpose sometimes, but we, I think, oftentimes downplay observational skills, and we shouldn't. And if I was a bad guy and I was looking to come into a church and do something bad, a ball cap and a pair of fake glasses and a mask, and I could be anyone and you wouldn't know it. And I pray that I'm wrong, but that would be a perfect opportunity, because there's going to be 200 new faces at that big church. And nobody, that's the perfect opportunity to walk in and cause either a scene and just stand up and say something stupid, or to try to harm God's people. And back to your point, and then I'll toss it back in your direction, Jim. There's never been a time in recent church history that the ability to read a person's intent across a room has been more important.
Right. Well, and I want to go back to white settlement, because you have not heard. I'm going to do my training that I did after this happened. I'm going to put it online, because a lot of people have been asking for it. We're missing a point. When the guy walked in the door with the beard and the wig, somebody should have been on him.
Yeah.
Now, if they walked over to him and said, listen, we have a church policy. Now, this is before Corona. You got to understand, this is before Corona. But if they would have walked over to him and said, hey, we don't allow fake beards and fake wigs, and he pulled his wig up and said, I just had really bad cancer treatment.
Yep.
And I don't want to scare anybody.
Yeah.
You would have sat with him, probably. That's what I would have done. I'd have gotten somebody over there to sit with him, just because, yes, you're right. This is something that's, I would want to talk to this guy. I would want to pray with this guy. This gives me an opportunity to really get a really good reading on this guy, because if something like that had happened, we want to be there for him. Please, what can we do to help you? We had a guy that came in that was septic and had a wound on it. Yeah. And he kind of showed it to one of the nurses, and she said, he's got to go. And so, but like I said, you go over and talk to these people. How can we help you? To not talk to this guy, which they did not. This is where the mistake came in. Nobody approached this guy. That's where the mistake was made.
Even without
what?
Even without approaching him, I think they take it a step further and say, okay, if you recognize that this person is abnormal, if you are not agreeing to do that contact and the greeting, well, then why was the body language from that point forward almost nonchalant, almost not engaged at all? There was no readiness. And it was like, as soon as the guy pulls his gun, it's all of a sudden, it was like they were caught deer in the headlights, unfortunately. And we lost great people.
Yeah. I've studied that tape. I've slowed it down. I've looked at it, all the different things. I've had range officers who teach. I'm a range officer, and I went out and wanted to get some other people to help me with this. We know what type of rounds he shot. It was just, there's a whole bunch of things that you see that most normal people wouldn't. And you exactly what you're talking about, Mike. They were so nonchalant on it. I would have had one of my guys sitting right next to him, either behind him or somewhere close to where when he stood up, they were ready. Anyway.
Yeah,
Paul, you're absolutely right.
I want to come back really quickly, and then I'm going to bounce it to James because we'll have to close down shortly. I've talked about the white settlement thing hundreds of times. Sitting with clients, talking to friends with other safety teams, firearms buddies, and everybody wants to talk about it. Even yet, COVID Corona kind of eclipsed it. But the thing that I always come back to is he definitely shouldn't have been allowed in the sanctuary, and we will never know, this side of a time machine and an alternate timeline. We will never know if they could have shut him down at the doors or in the parking lot without loss of life, but it would have been a limiter. It would have been a limiter, and that's the thing I keep coming back to is in the sanctuary it was fish in a barrel. At the doors it was better. Halfway across the parking lot it was golden. If he could have been stopped, if he could have been interviewed, and he'd practiced dropping that weapon and grabbing it, I can about guarantee you. Sure. And I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe he came there to kill people. No. I heard it posited that maybe he came there to rob them, but I believe he came there to take lives.
No, he came to rob them. I can tell you it was a robbery, because if he wanted to kill people, after he fired the two shots he fired, he turned to run. He turned to run. There were people right there he could have killed right there. He turned to run.
Think he was pointing at the stage?
He was putting a gun in front of him because there was an exit right up there. He was putting the gun in front of him because he's running that way. He doesn't want anybody in front of him. The church recognized him because he had been there before asking for money and they would not give it to him. The first time that he stood up during communion, I think he thought that it was the offering and he sat back down. But then he didn't know whether or not they were going to take it, which is where he got up and asked the deacon in the back whether or not, I don't know, like you said, until we go back in a time machine or something like that, or get to heaven and ask the deacon what had happened. But to me, professionally speaking, as many videos that I've watched that went bad. And here's the other thing too. When the first safety team member pulled on him, he escalated it more. If he'd have raised his hands up and said, whatever you want, you can have, that probably would have given Wilson, the guy who was a shooter, to be able to get into a position to where he might be able to do something. But here's a problem we run into. When Wilson did hit him, there was a sympathetic pull. There was a third shot fired. He fired the first. As he turned to run, he was hit. When he was hit, he fired a third round. It went off. So somebody might have gotten killed that day or might not have. We don't know. But the first thing you do is when somebody's pointing a gun at you, give up.
You're not gonna outdraw the.
You're not gonna outdraw.
Pointing at you.
Reaction is slower than action.
Yeah. And plus he had trouble with his holster. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. Like I said, I have analyzed this thing to the nth degree. Just real quick, and I know we're running out of time, and we did get on this. But this is how it affects people. I have a half sister that lives in Fort Worth. She works at Harris Hospital. That is where the deacon, and I can't think of his name right now. It's the deacon worked at Harris Hospital. He was a nurse there. She knew him. She said he was a bright light when he walked into the room. That's how far these effects go when something like this happens. She wasn't even there. She's not even in that area. She's over in Hearst. But when she contacted me about the shooting, she said, I personally knew him, and he was just this incredible guy. So this is why these are so sad and so tragic, is because we think it's just in the church family. It's not. It's all out here, who he worked with, who he associated with, family, friends, all those things like that. That's how devastating this is. So
one of the things I just want to read real quick in the comments that John with Gentle Response mentioned, it's very true. He just posted the challenge when talking about like the threat analysis, profiling, that sort of thing. The challenge is that good people who mean well do not have the training and experience to properly read body language and can find themselves creating their own tunnel vision and convince themselves that a person is suspicious or a bad guy and suffer from confirmation bias. I mean, that's really true, at least with, with the situations that I've been in where it's like, and I mean, we don't have time for it, but we've all dealt with situations where somebody came up to us and said, that doesn't look right. And then you go to investigate it and they're like, oh, never mind. Don't bother that person because it's really okay. So
I want to throw one thing in here, and I truly, truly believe this. I really do. God doesn't, if you're really paying attention to what God has you doing, okay, let's be realistic about this. If you really pay attention to what God has you doing, he will not put you in a situation that he has not trained you for. I'm sorry. I just totally believe that. That if you have studied anything, if you really, truly believe what you're doing is serving him. Now, White was the guy, the safety team member that pulled his gun. His last name was White. I think the other guy's name was Wallace. I'm not really for sure, but White pulled his gun. White had never been trained. I don't think he had truly been trained on, like you said, body language, verbal de-escalation, any of these things like that. But I just truly feel that God puts you in situations to test you. How are you going to respond to this? And if you get up that morning and you're really focused, I'm going to stop right here. God really doesn't put you in a situation he hasn't trained you for, unless it's just something that you think that you are bigger, badder, the toughest mother out there. Guess what?
Well, I mean, honestly, that's why every Sunday we start with prayer, and, our team gets together and prays and says, okay, let's pray for wisdom. And, I'd be lying if I said that there weren't situations, and, I've told you guys different stories of stuff that's happened at my church where, I look back on it now and I'm like scratching my head, but, I remember praying for wisdom that day.
Sure.
And I remember God, coming in and, truckloads of wisdom, because when I second guess myself now and I look back, the first thing that pops into my head is, why did you do that? Because what you did at that time didn't make sense to what policy or procedures were or whatever. But, it made sense in that situation, and God used it and blessed it. And, that situation was far less than it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've all had situations where it could have gone south in a hurry.
Very quickly.
Of it, if we did not have the wisdom of wisdom from God. So, Paul, I'll let you. You want to throw in your quick comments, and then I'll let you close in prayer.
Yeah, I just made a comment here in the live comments. Unless God watches over the city, the watchmen watch in vain. And as a chaplain, and you'll appreciate this, Jim. Last week, I'm riding with an officer, and he gets called in mutual aid to a town that got a guy in a shed, hole up, believed to be armed. And so you've got sheriff department response. These are small towns, local law enforcement response, and Red Rover, send mutual aid on over. And so we load up and we're getting ready to head that way, and long guns are coming out and different things. And as we climb in the vehicle, the officer with me, the only other person in the vehicle, is a believer. And out loud, I'm praying, and I'm like, Lord God, go ahead of us, put a holy fear, a reverent fear of you in this man, that he realizes he could die. That he needs to surrender, protect these officers that are there, protect the officers that are going there. Please don't let anyone get hurt. And I kid you not, within 30 seconds, we haven't even cleared the city limits. We hear, you can disregard, all responding units, you can disregard, he's surrendered. And the officer with me is like, would you stop doing that before we get there? because he sees the power of prayer. And of course, he's young and he's a great guy, but there is so much power in prayer. Anyway, I had to share.
There is.
I had to share. So, unless anyone else has any other comments, speaking of prayer, I'm ready to close if you guys are. So,
go for it.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, I thank you for friendships. I thank you for people that you're bringing into our lives. I thank you for the experiences that you give us and the training that you are providing, Lord God. I thank you for men and women that their heart is to prepare people for the day that nobody wants to go through. And so I ask that you would bless Jim, his ministry, his family, all those that are partnering with us and their ministries and their families, that you would guide them, that you'd keep our church body safe. Give us wisdom, Lord God, beyond what we deserve about how to handle this, Lord God. I ask for physical and spiritual, supernatural protection over our church bodies as we go back, Lord God, that our churches would be invisible to people that want to come to do harm. Lord God, that the bad guys wouldn't find us, or Lord God, that when they would pull up, just like I know of so many times in Scripture where they would see angels and they'd go, nope, I'm out. So Lord God, I thank you for these men. I thank you for the ministry that you've given us, and we just ask that you guide us in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.
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 All right, brothers.
Take
Thanks
care.
for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Live
Jim.
long and prosper.
They're short and fair.
I'll pull him out. So again, thanks for watching. I'm going to do a quick closing video here, and we will be right back with you. All right. So that is our promo video for the 31-day devotion War Ready. That's available through Amazon, and then also you can download it as a ebook through Kindle now. So just throwing that out there. And then special thanks to, if you missed the first part of the broadcast tonight, special thanks to Jim and Wendy Howard, Trinity Security Allies, for sponsoring this month, and also Dwayne Harris, Full Armor Church. And what we're going to start doing, and I may do it today, and then definitely we're going to start doing it in the month of May, is every person that actually watches the live feed, when we put the live feed out on Sunday evening, we'll put your name in a drawing for some resource. It might be a copy of the devotional or another church book, or just different things that we go through as far as resources. So other than that, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us. You can do that through the website, churchsafetyguys.com. And we will see you next week. And May 3rd, we should have Carl Chin on as our guest next week. So that'll be pretty fun to get him in and learn a little bit more about the faith-based security network that he oversees, and we'll go from there. So until then, you guys take care, and thanks for joining. God bless.